Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings, Florida over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So sit back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the articles from the September 19, 1919 edition. Legislature failed to appropriate for the primary. Purposely or otherwise, the regular correspondents at Tallahassee have failed to give the people of the state one of the biggest news sensations of the day from a political point of view. No money was appropriated by the last legislature for a primary. The writer has carefully examined the General and Special Appropriation Acts of the special session of 1918 and of the regular session of 1919, and he finds to his horror that no money was set aside for this very worthy cause. When the primary was first brought into being in this state by an act of its legislature, $30,000 was set apart for this laudable object. This was the nest egg. The amounts derived from assessing the candidates and biannual appropriations have kept the primary going up to this time. But now, the main sum has been practically exhausted, and the assessments of the candidates alone will not pay the bill unless the fees are so increased as to make the high cost of running for office virtually prohibitive, or unless money for holding the primary can be borrowed from some other state fund. Mass meeting here favors bonds for new school building. Much enthusiasm for the proposal to issue bonds for a new school building developed at the mass meeting of citizens and taxpayers of the Hastings School District held Wednesday night at the auditorium. In the past, it seems that everybody waited for everybody else to act, with the result that nothing was done. But the getting together of the live wires of Hastings and vicinity has begun to bear fruit. A committee was named to secure legal advice and plan the first steps towards issuing bonds. At present, the Hastings School District is taxed 3 mills, but in the special district that was proposed at the meeting, it was suggested that in order to carry the indebtedness, it would be necessary to put the millage up to the limit, that being 5 mills. By a close examination by a representative of the Herald, it was found that the school is beyond expression. The building would not make a good warehouse. The ventilation is poor, and especially is this the case in the smaller rooms in the yard. The fire escapes are dangerous. In case of fire, it is not known which would prove more disastrous, the fire or the fire escapes. In most of the rooms, 2 are sitting in the same seat, there not being enough desks to accommodate all the pupils. The yard is lower than the road, and with a few hours of rain, the entire school grounds are covered with water deep enough to drown a small child. The latrines are in a very unsanitary condition, and at present, it is impossible to better the situation. The cesspool is lower than the level of the ground, and in rainy weather, there is too much water to flush the latrines. The teachers are working under odds, and they cannot get satisfactory results as long as these conditions exist. Now, with these facts presented, could anyone say that the present school is good enough for a progressive, wide-awake town like Hastings? The school facilities are far below the average of other East Coast towns, and as long as the present conditions exist, Hastings cannot come to the front and be in the ring. Good news about Ormond roads. F.J. Parker has just received a letter from a friend mailed at Daytona, which conveys news of the now famous 2.7 miles of highway north of Ormond. Yesterday, the road gang was busy paving this stretch with coquina, and this surfacing is later to be oiled. So far, about 300 yards have been done on the south end. The balance of the road, this report states, is very rough but passable, and there is no danger of getting stuck. Northern potato crop is far below normal. Southern planters are advised by the Department of Agriculture to stock up immediately on seed potatoes for next spring's plantings, as the northern potato crop is below normal both in acreage and yield throughout Maine and other northern potato-producing states where the harvest is now on in full blast. Concerning cabbage, demand for the southern cabbage likely will be heavy early in the new year, and specialists of the Department of Agriculture suggest that Southerners sow at least a normal acreage of cabbage seed this fall. Waller sends samples of Maine seed potatoes to Hastings. G.W. Waller is now in Maine selecting his seed potatoes for the coming season's planting. He has sent a sample of his selections to his office here, and they are the finest lot ever seen in the Hastings territory. Mr. Miles is on the job and will be glad to show them to anyone who wishes to call. First shipment of grapefruit has passed through Hastings. The first carload of grapefruit to roll this season went through here this week, consigned to the Standard Growers Exchange from Miami to its branch in Waycross, Georgia. The fruit was packed in Dade County and was held up by State Fruit Inspector W.C. Gibson on the ground that it did not pass the acid test, although it passed the color test. The attorney for the shipper obtained a temporary injunction in the circuit court releasing the fruit. It is said the fruit almost reached the acid test and was high in color test. A ruling of the court last year was that one test was all that is required, although the state law provides for both acid and color tests. The action of the Dade Circuit Court will likely have its effect on the condemnation of early fruit by the state inspector. Improving barber shop facilities. Mr. Oliver, the new manager of the Hastings Barber Shop, is making some needed improvements in his tonsorial parlors that, when completed, will add much to the general appearance of the shop. Mr. Sims, who formerly managed the shop, was left-handed, and the chairs which had been arranged to accommodate him are now being replaced, and the new coat of paint, which is now being applied to the interior, will contribute the finishing touch to the improved appearance of this emporium. Repainting Hastings Hotel. The contract for painting the Hotel Hastings has been let to J.R. Knight, who will also make any repairs that may be needed. The contract includes some interior decorating which will add much to the attractiveness of this local hostelry. From the editorial section. Governor in no danger. By a whim of fate, Sidney J. Katz was elected governor of Florida. He was taken seriously during his campaign by thousands of men, many of them intelligent but convinced that everything he told them was truth. He succeeded in stirring up much bitterness in the state, appealing always to prejudice and not to any qualifications or merit he himself possessed. A moment's reflection would have convinced the intelligent people who followed him that no man canvassing for votes on such issues was suitable for the responsible office of governor. But the intelligent class did not hesitate that one moment to reflect. However, they have had ample opportunity to judge the man whom they honored with the highest position in the state. The governor seems to be under the impression that conditions have remained stationary and that he can get away with the same bunk he handed out to greedy ears a few years ago. His armed guards render him ridiculous. No one desires to hurt him, although he seems to be posing as a target for assassins. He has made bitter enemies, but they were his former friends, and they threaten him with no bodily harm. The only thing he has to fear is the ballots at the next election, when he will retire to private life for keeps. The Hastings Herald had more than stories you'd find in modern newspapers, but also local notices that were more of a social report, a way to know what was going on in town and in the personal lives of residents. Here are a few from this edition. Operation Successful. Postmaster C.F. Hopkins has returned from Jacksonville, where he underwent an operation recently for the removal of a cataract from one eye. The operation was successful, and sight has been restored to the orb that was totally blind. Fleet finished. Fred Walton has completed the building of a fishing fleet of 11 boats, which he will take to Stewart for the late fall and winter fishing. He expects to leave about the middle of next week. The boats range from 23 to 25 feet in length and will be operated by gas engines. Raises strawberry guavas. F.A. Betts has been marketing here a great quantity of small guavas, which are known as the strawberry variety. They are a delicious table fruit, the flavor being much superior to the larger varieties. But Mr. Betts says they are equally good for making jelly. They possess the advantage of growing well in this latitude, withstanding the cold snaps of winter, while the larger varieties are very sensitive to cold and are killed by a freeze. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Morello, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. And to wrap up this week in Hastings Headline History, how about a tune from the time, a 1919 hit, Nicholas Orlando's orchestra with Till We Meet Again.